Over 1 million teachers use IXL in their classrooms every day for one reason. They love it. The gold standard teaching and learning solution, IXL provides thousands of instructional resources, actionable analytics, and assessments to increase teacher capacity and effectiveness. IXL takes the guesswork out of lesson planning with ready-made plans. Built-in engagement tools such as customizable competitions make learning fun for students. Dr. Trujillo, superintendent at Tuscan Unified School District, says this about IXL, quote, "For the teacher, IXL opens up the door to be a lot more effective and provide more differentiated instruction to the different subgroups of students in their class," end quote. Empower your teachers with the tools and insights they need to enhance instruction, all in one single, easy-to-use platform. Get started today at IXL.com.
You're listening to Monday Matters, a Principal Matters podcast production.
Hi, Principal Matters listeners. This is Will Parker back with my co-host, Dr. Jen Schwanke, for another Monday Matters. Jen, it's January, and each week we start the week off with just some updates from you and from me. And this week I want to talk a little bit about wellness as we step into the new year. I want to encourage Principal Matters listeners, anyone who's listening for the first time, to check out all of our archives of shows, the more than 400 and whatever episodes that we've done up until this point. But Jen, recently, I haven't even had time to really write about this because it was something that I discovered over break. But I've been thinking a lot about wellness, and I came across a book by Dr. Eric Topol called Super Agers, an evidence-based approach to longevity. Anybody who's listening or to this won't see me hold up the book, but anybody who's watching it on YouTube, you can see the cover of this. I just began it, but I also heard an interview that Adam Grant did with him on his podcast, and it just made me pause because I know you and I care deeply about wellness, and I just want to give a few caveats to listeners, if you don't mind, as we step into this quick conversation. One, Dr. Topol was a part of a study of what he calls welderly individuals, people who are in their upper 80s and older, who have no current health conditions or taking no medication. They were able to gather a study of 1,400 individuals from 85 to 102 that were in those categories. Took them, I think he said, 7 years to gather that many people for the study. And their goal was to just do some comparisons between really, really healthy older individuals and average populations. They were able to take DNA samples from every person. And because of the Genome Project, they were able to study their DNA and do comparisons. The surprise, and again, I'll just point people to the book because I'm not a scientist, but the surprise for them was that even though we assume, I've always assumed, they just have good genes, there's not a significant difference between the genes of people that are welderly and people that are typically elderly but have often much more pronounced health conditions. And you won't be surprised to know this, but it's always good to hear it, that the number one takeaway, I think, from all of that was that prevention really matters, that the way they were behaving 20 years before they were being studied made a big difference on their health outcomes. And so I just want to stop there, Jen, because I know saying we're committed to wellness, saying that we're committed to taking care of ourselves, especially at the beginning of a new year, can sound aspirational. But I'm just curious, your thoughts and practices as you're stepping into the new year. And I know you've been doing some reading too.
Right. Well, I want to caveat too. I'm not a doctor and I'm not a scientist either. I can't say that enough, but I do think quite a bit about wellness. And I am always struck when I go to my annual checkup, my doctor is always blown away that I have no medications. I think there's a lot of people who, they need a lot of medications, and then that creates side effects, which creates side effects, which, and that, every decision is one between a person and their doctor. And, certainly we have made huge advances in healthcare, but I can understand why it would be very difficult to find elderly people to do those studies. But like you mentioned, I think prevention is huge. And I think as I age, I think a lot about wellness, both mental and physical. And I think about how we have to let ourselves age, but also stay very, very active. So the book that I just finished, and I want to be clear, I didn't know we were going to be talking about this. I wasn't out doing some research, but it's called The Running Ground.
Mm.
And it's a book by Nicholas Thompson. And it's a book about a lot of things. It's about his relationship with his father, who had a very, very difficult second half of his life. And the author makes this connection between the time that his father stopped running and when his life kind of fell apart.
Mm.
And so he decides to do the opposite, and he keeps running. And I'm not sitting here preaching running. That is my activity of choice, but I think it's anything. I think it could be walking, swimming, whatever. And so he realizes he's really, really fast, and he trains and he hires a coach and he gets the best time in the world for his age or whatever, and this, that, and the other thing. And then he realizes he can't go any faster because his age catches up to him. So then he runs longer. And his point is, you just have to keep going. You have to have a goal. You have to have something that you are working toward. And so I think there's a lot wrapped up into what I just said. It's the physical response. It's the, putting good things in your body, and it's having a goal that will keep you hungry, so to speak, as we age.
That's so good, Jen. And what I love about that is that, and I wrote that down, Nicholas Thompson, The Running Ground, because there's something really inspiring about a story connected to those kinds of outcomes too. Super Agers is more scientific, and it's the study from Eric Topol's perspective. And I've just begun the book, so I can't
Right.
talk about it in terms of its whole context. But what I love about that too is there are really I'm just going to touch on three things really quickly, since on Monday Matters we just kind of, you and I shared the current things we're learning, and they're not going to be surprising. That the strongest preventative actions we can be taking 20 years before we could be diagnosed with something that could affect our brains or our hearts or our neurosystems. The three things are movement. You just mentioned it. Rest, which has a profound effect on longevity, and nutrition. And I don't know, Jed, it was just so funny because I listened to this while working out, and I was listening and I kept pausing it. I listened to it over break with my wife and I when we were driving over the holidays. And there was probably nothing in there that was profoundly new, but I don't know why it feels like I have to be reminded over and over and over again that it's the simple practices that over time produce the healthiest results. And maybe it's because we live in a culture where quick fixes are so attractive, drive-throughs are so easy. Give me a pill, give me a shot. And by the way, if anyone who's listening to this requires medication or any kind of therapies or whatever, please continue following your doctor's recommendations. Jen and I are just readers and learners. But Jen, I'll just say the same thing when I go for my annual physical each year. It's just really encouraging because I'll be 57 this month. But it's been so encouraging that those commitments over time produce good outcomes. And so I want to say this to listeners just because I know at the beginning of a new calendar year, we often make commitments to our own wellness, and physical wellness is just part of it. There's a lot of other factors involved in environments and amounts of stress, in times of life and care of other individuals, whether you're parenting a child or maybe you're at the place where you're adulting with aging parents. And so there's a lot of factors that can affect your health. And I know that there are also seasons. There's times where some things just happen that require some rest and rejuvenation or recovery. So, but I just wanted to bring that to this conversation because I just think it's important for us to not forget that the long-term benefits are often worth the short-term commitments.
Right. Right. And, to circle back to this book, The Running Ground, the reason I liked it is this guy doesn't just run and write about it. He was the CEO of The Atlantic. He worked for The New Yorker. He wanted to be a writer. And then it turned out he was not as good at that as he was about managing writers. And he has a wife and he has 3 children. And he has a very, he talks about the commitment to his profession. And so here's where I tie it back to principles. Do the things we do for our bodies make us better principals, or by being principals, are we more apt to have the discipline and the grit to take care of our bodies? What we hope is that there's no answer to that, right? That one feeds the other. And that, I think principals are so incredibly gritty, and they keep coming back, keep coming back and keep coming back in spite of, one stacked hard day after another. And that is the same as making decisions about wellness: mental, physical, social, emotional. There's so much we're not in control of. There's so much that we can't even influence. But boy, the decisions about our own bodies, we certainly can. The author of this book also went through thyroid cancer. And so, he was knocked flat for a couple of years and had to come back from that. So I just think those stories are critical for us to keep remembering. It can feel very lonely to work hard to take care of oneself. And it really shouldn't, because we're all on the exact same journey to be welderly.
Well, I want to tell a quick story as we're wrapping up this conversation, and without naming any names because I don't have permission. Oh, by the way, I'm going to break script for just a second and bring someone into this conversation who really wants to. This is for those of you that are not listening but watching. This is Nitro. Nitro is one of the 2 pets in my family, and he has been so determined this whole talk, Jen, to be in the conversation, and I forgot to put him outside of the room beforehand. So he's just going to sit here and purr while we talk.
Our listeners should know that I'm like holding my breath because I'm so worried Roxy is going to start scratching on the door. So our pets are part of the podcast, people.
They are today,
part of the podcast,
for sure. So right before break, I got an email from a longtime listener who's an assistant principal and was thanking me for the learning that we do on the podcast, also for pointing her to some resources that have been helpful. And she shared a story of a teacher in her building, one of her best, who she noticed this semester was just really struggling. And so she had just talked to her individually and realized that she was kind of hitting one of those emotional walls of, I've been doing this a while. I'm beginning to feel really exhausted and tired. And this will sound like a shameless plug, Jen, but it's to confirm what we were just talking about. But she gave her a copy of my book, Pause, Breathe, Flourish, Living Your Best Life as an Educator. And just said, this book has been really helpful for me. If you think it's helpful for you, just read it. And she said right before break, the teacher had left her a really kind note, just reflecting on, first of all, how encouraging it was for someone to recognize when they're working with somebody who needs a little extra encouragement, but then also just having a resource available that gives you an opportunity and to just walk through some of those things we're talking about right now: your body, your family, your finances, your spiritual life, your resources, your future, your mentorship, all those things that make us parts of who we are. And so wellness isn't just physical health either. It involves so much of those other capacities too. And so I just want to encourage any listeners today, if you are looking for a resource, obviously you can check out mine as well, but there's some great ones out there, Jen. And I know that you are also a big proponent of, when you're running up against those walls, think about a reset. Think about take a step back and give yourself permission to do that reset, because there's something really encouraging about permission to keep growing.
Right. And it's hard to do. It's hard to give ourselves permission for the very things we tell other people to do. Very hard.
Well, Jen, I'm going to wrap up this conversation by just encouraging listeners, if you have made any commitments to wellness that have been helpful for you, let us know, because I love to be aware of what other practices are helping other people, or resources or good books you're listening to, or podcasts. Share those with us. Jen, how can listeners stay connected with you and your great resources?
Absolutely. Find me at jenschwanke.com, and you can click on newsletter and subscribe, and you'll hear from me every week.
And as always, you can check out all of our resources at WilliamDParker.com, and you can and subscribe there for our weekly updates. Until next time, thanks for doing what matters, and we'll see you at our flagship show on Wednesday. Thank you for listening to today's episode of Principal Matters, the School Leaders Podcast. If you enjoyed the show, would you take a moment and like, share, subscribe, or leave us a review? In fact, if you share it out with a friend, even more people can become a part of these conversations. Sign up for our newsletter at williamdparker.com for even more free resources. And don't forget to check out our website to learn more about our books, professional development offerings, Grow Academies, masterminds, executive coaching, and keynote presentations. Wow, let's keep learning together. And thank you for doing what matters.
Monday Matters.